Silver just keeps climbing upwards, and a lot of new stackers are coming into this hobby asking, what should I buy right now? Well, I'm going to give you the four main categories or options that you can stack, and depending on what strategy resonates with you the most is the one you should probably focus on. I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight on my own stack, what I like to buy, and what has worked for me so far. On top of that, I'm also going to tell you what every new stacker should do when they're starting out. So let's break everything down in today's video. Want to win 100 ounces of American Silver Eagles completely free? Well, in case you missed out on the first opportunity, JM Bullion is now giving you a second chance to win 5 full tubes of 100 coins packed in a custom waterproof Pelican case. There's no purchase necessary, and the newest and latest giveaway is going to end on December 11th of this year. And if you want to get in on this last opportunity, click the link in the description below for a chance to win. And again, just to be clear, JM Bullion is not sponsoring this channel in any sort of way. This is just me wanting to pass this opportunity along to help you guys out. So don't miss out on this. Click on the link in the description to enter for your chance to win 100 ounces of free silver. Hi everybody, and welcome back to yet another video. So there are four main categories that you can start stacking silver with, and I'm also going to give you in what order you should probably focus them in. I recently put up a poll asking current stackers out there which silver they would own if they could only buy one type. And in that, majority of the people would stack the government issued coins, and going straight down the list from generics to 90% and then numismatics. Now, these are, in my opinion, the correct ranking order, if you will, in terms of 1 through 4 as to what the majority of the people would want. And you can see that based off the polling numbers. While 384 isn't a massive sample size, I do think it's accurate enough to reference for what a lot of people look for in precious metals. Now, I will say that for new stackers, the order should shift around just a little bit, and I'm going to tell you what that should be later on. But for now, let's cover what the most popular choice of is going to be the government issued coins. So in my stack, I currently have American Silver Eagles. I also own a couple Austrian Philharmonics and a few Britannias. Now, these are just a few countries that produce their own government-backed form of silver or gold for that matter. And here in the US, we produce the American Silver Eagles, as you see here. And these, along with any other government issued coins, are going to carry some pros and some cons to them. And the benefit to these are that they are highly globally recognized and easy to resell. You can generally sell them for a few dollars over spot, depending on the type of coin, the condition, whatever market conditions are calling for, and where you're selling them. My current local coin shop will let me sell them for $2 over spot for each American Silver Eagle. That's just how they do it. An additional benefit to this that you might not know about is the fact that they are backed by the currency of the nation that produced this form of silver. So for whatever reason, if you needed to get into a different asset tier like the euro or the pound or whatever it is, you could exchange these for fiat currency that's denominated in that asset. So which just helps reduce the risk in case one currency collapses. Like, for example, if the US dollar collapsed, then we could theoretically exchange the Philharmonics or the Britannias in their respective currency and protect yourself that way. So, but the downside to these is that there's premiums with it. Because they are so well recognized and desired and exchangeable, they're going to carry a higher premium. So you got to pay for these things, right? You're going to pay extra for these compared to generic silver, which we're going to cover in a bit. So if your focus is on the comfortability and the simplification of sale and the exchange value, then these are going to be your choice to stack. So the second option is going to be your generic rounds and bars. Now, I want to emphasize this point. If you are a new stacker, this is what you need to start with. So this is the answer to your video here in the title. This is what you should start with. Generic silver is not produced by a government entity, but rather it's produced by a private mint, or another way of thinking about it, produced by business. The reason why these are the choice for new stackers to start with is because of the benefits that are associated to them. They will almost always carry the cheapest premiums. So you're never going to overpay a ridiculous amount of money for generic silver. Just as an example, this buffalo round that you're looking at right now could cost $43 an ounce if we're using today's spot prices, and the American Silver Eagle that I showed you before could run about $50 an ounce. So you're both paying for these two different coins that's worth an ounce of silver, but you're paying two different prices for them. And if you were to buy a full tube of 20 each, so 20 generic rounds and 20 American Silver Eagles, you could have saved an extra $7 plus per ounce of silver, which adds up at the end, because if you were to get a full tube of each, you could have bought an extra few more ounces of generic silver just by sticking to that alone. So these are going to be the easiest form of silver to stack in bulk, and that should be the focus for any new stacker for this reason as well. This way, you can reduce the risk of overspending, and it helps you get started into this hobby the cheapest way possible, at least in terms of premiums. And there's no point in doing it any other way, in my opinion. And the bulk of your stack should consist of generic silver. And just one quick side note, the higher in weight that you go, the cheaper the premiums get. So while you may have to pay more up in dollars for more ounces of silver, the premiums are going to be a little bit different. So on a 1 ounce coin, it could be $3 over spot, and a 10 ounce bar could be 50 cents over spot. So something to consider. And the one thing with generic rounds too, if you remember, I said that they are privately minted, meaning the businesses who strike the silver also designs them. So there are popular versions, just like the government coins, that are more recognizable than others, like these buffalo rounds. And there are some that do put designs that are related to themes, holidays, events, whatever it is, right? And while they may be cool to purchase, they can be less desirable when it comes to reselling. That's probably the only and smallest disadvantage that generic silver has. Now, while I personally don't know of any dealer who has rejected a sale, even if it has a Christmas snowman dated from 1972 on it, that will probably never ever get bought again, it's unlikely that you'll have too much difficulty getting them off your hands at all. But don't be surprised that when you do go to sell them, that you get offered at or even below spot sometimes for generic rounds. They don't have that same strong resale factor like the government coins do. So as a new stacker, this should be your focus, and even for experienced stackers too, because the goal with stacking is to get as much weight as possible, and not having to overspend will help you accomplish that. So if you're getting started, buy these types of silver first, the generic rounds or generic bars, whatever you want to call it. Then you can explore with and experiment with different types in the future if you're actually interested in going further with the hobby. And the third one on the list is your 90% silver, otherwise known as junk silver or constitutional silver. These are primarily for the US audience, and as I've heard, it's not as popular overseas, and while there may be a small market for it, it's definitely a US based focus. But that's where most of the viewers on this channel are from, so let's include that. And these are used, or these used to be a part of the coinage that we would exchange like we do today. The difference is these are made up of 90% silver, hence the name. These got discontinued essentially in 1965, and there are some other variations that go all the way into the 1970s, but for simplicity purposes, 1965 is what we're going to go with. And so while the average person may actually mistake these as regular 25-cent coins, one of these silver quarters is actually worth roughly $8 today. And they still float around in circulation now and then, but they're not that easy to find unless you do some sort of coin roll hunting or you rummage through some old coins that you have lying around. And I always personally check my change anytime I get any from the store, as I have found pretty cool things like buffalo nickels, Indian head pennies, silver dimes, silver quarters, etc. And sometimes you can get those if you're lucky. But you can tell that they're silver from a regular quarter from the edge. The 1964 and earlier, or any 90% silver coins, are going to have a silver edge around them, unlike the modern coins, which have a bit of that brown, which is copper, and kind of a silver mix to it. So while it's not primarily of silver by modern, it has that look to it. So if you can remember that or the dates from 1964 and earlier, you'll know you got some 90% silver on your hands. And these are great for fractional use, and it can help with some, I guess, barriers to entry for some people if $43 an ounce is too much. And right now, these are actually cheaper in premiums than generic silver, and which is kind of rare. But if you can get some of these to start with, this is another great option as well. The only downside, other than the lackluster or the unattractiveness that they tend to present, these are just not as easy to stack. I mean, if you try to stack quarters, it's not going to really do that well. So, storage can be a little bit challenging, and the quantity is definitely more noticeable. But one more thing, if you can remember, $1.40 makes up roughly 1 ounce of silver. So if you can make and play with dimes, quarters, half dollars, whatever, to make $1.40, then you have 1 ounce of silver in your hands. Just be sure not to get these mixed up with any other regular day-to-day change. And selling these should not be an issue either. But you can imagine if you try to sell a couple thousand quarters or something crazy like that, that would definitely take some effort in figuring out which one of them is real. And if they all are what you say they are, you can just imagine the time spent trying to do that. So it's just another thing to keep in mind. But 90% silver is great for small trades and for potential barter uses. If you're concerned about SHTF scenarios, then this is the option for you to stack. Since it's really cheap right now, I'd even say for new stackers, on top of the generic rounds, this should also be included as a secondary option of what you should buy if you're trying to get started today. And finally, the high-priced or even numismatic coins. And a numismatic is typically something that is going to be collected for its rarity, its historical significance, artistic value, or whatever, rather than just the face value or the metal content itself. Now, this is the best thing I have that's close to that type of situation. I don't think this U.S. Army privy is going to be considered a numismatic item anytime soon, but if in the future it did, then this would be something that could be something worth this numismatic value. And essentially, that's not the point of this part of the section. Essentially, a good way of knowing whether or not something is numismatic or has rarity is going to be if it's slabbed or graded. Now, I don't have that right now on me, but I used to have something that was slabbed and graded. But typically, objects or items that are old or older, like over 100 years old, are going to be in some sort of slab if they have any actual value and rarity associated to it. And these things are going to be graded by professional grading services that will determine the condition of the object, and essentially you can kind of price the value to it based off of its condition and what it was considered to be, I guess, by those grading services. And this area, again, tends to be something that you may not want to get started in. I'm not an expert in this area at all. So unless you've always been focused on this type of stuff, which by that point I would just assume you already know what you're doing. But for the average person who's starting out, this is an area that I would definitely avoid if you're getting started, because there's so many fakes, there's so much overpricing on certain things, and if you don't know what you're doing, there's a lot of details that need to be understood before you simply just purchase something because you think or you heard that it was rare or it has some sort of value to it. So that's basically it. It's just a very simplified way of knowing what to possibly get started with. And again, these are not meant to persuade you to avoid a certain area or just to go all in another. There's different strategies that you should be understanding of before you actually go commit to something, because unfortunately the only way you're going to understand something is to put action into that decision. You're not going to learn the little details or possess the understanding that videos like this will just do by itself. You're going to actually have to physically get started buying and selling precious metals now, and then to truly understand the points that I'm outlining in this video. But if I were starting out today, I would begin with the generic rounds, or maybe even the junk silver, since the premiums are really low. Then you would branch into other areas like the government coins or anything else that you might be interested in. And don't forget about the strategies that I mentioned before, and I'll recap that real quick. If you're looking for safety, the government coins are going to be your go-to. If you want to stack for weight and pay a little bit less, then the generic rounds is your choice. For any SHTF and barter situation, it's going to be the 90%. Or if you want that rarity, the history, or that collectible aspect, then you're going to go with the numismatic options. Regardless, you should start with the generics and then expand from there. And that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Let me know which option or strategy you stack the most towards. Drop that down in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye, guys.